5 love languages.
Yeah.
I've heard some African languages before, like Zulu.
Honesty, compassion, something like that.
I guess one love language is Italian. And sex. And French.
Well, here we are again. I hope that this week we had lots of words of affirmation flowing back and forth. Is that right? Yeah, by all means, yeah. Okay, this week we're going to focus on quality time, by which I mean giving your spouse your undivided attention. Not multitasking. A lot of guys think, I can watch television, I can read a magazine and hear everything my wife says. And they can, but that's not quality time. Quality time is looking in the eyes, giving her your undivided attention, or giving him your undivided attention. I had a couple some years ago who came to my office. They actually came from out of town. They traveled, I think, about 3 hours to get there. And they sat down, and the first thing the wife said was, "Dr. Chapman, I want you to know that we don't have any money problems." She said, "I was reading an article that said that money's a big problem in marriage." She said, "Well, we don't have any money problems." She said, "We both have worked through the years, and we don't have any money problems." And she said, "Another thing I want you to know is that we don't argue." She said, "We just don't like to argue. We don't believe in arguing." So I'm sitting there thinking, did she drive all this way to tell me what a wonderful marriage she has, And then she said, "The problem is I just don't feel any love from my husband. We live in the same house, but I just don't feel any love coming from him." Well, I looked over at him, and he said, "I don't understand her." He said, "I do everything I know to show her that I love her. She says she doesn't feel loved." He said, "I don't know what else to do for her." I said, "Well, what do you do to show your love for her?" He said, "Well," I work and I pay the bills." He said, "I mow the grass, I keep the car clean." He said, "Since I get home from work before she does, I start the supper." He said, "Sometimes I have the supper almost done when she gets home." He said, "After supper," "I'll wash the dishes for her." And he said, "I'll help her with the laundry." And I'm beginning to think, what does this woman do? This guy's doing everything, He said, "I do all these things to show her that I love her, and yet she sits there and tells you what she's been telling me for 2 or 3 years. She doesn't feel love." He said, "I don't know what else to do for her." She said, "Dr. Chapman, he's right. He does all those things. He's a hard-working man. But the problem is," and she started crying, "we don't ever talk." She said, "We haven't talked in 30 years. She said, "He's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes, folding the clothes, always doing something." You understand what her love language is? Quality time. He's speaking acts of service, which we're going to talk about next session. But what she wants is quality time. Sit on the couch and look at me and talk to me. She's dying for quality time. And he is as sincere as he can be, but he's speaking the wrong love language. Now, quality time also has different ways of expression. We talk about dialects of each of the languages. Now, she's talking about one dialect, which is quality conversation. She wants him to sit on the couch and let's dialogue. Let's talk. Let's listen to each other. Let's get to know each other. Quality time. Now, for some people, this is very difficult, because they just have never been the kind of people that would sit down and talk. They talk on the run, but they don't sit down and talk and give the person their undivided attention. So let me give you some ideas on how to foster this quality conversation thing. One is to, first of all, set a time to do it. If you don't have a time to sit down and talk, you probably won't sit down and talk. So in the book, I talk about a daily sharing time with your spouse, in which you sit down with each other, and the minimum is that you share 3 things that happened to me today and how I feel about them. It's a simple thing. You can even set a time limit, 20 minutes we're going to share 3 things that happened in your life, how you feel about them, 3 things happened in my life, and how I feel about them. It's an easy way to get people to start. You set the time, a daily sharing time, and you've got an agenda. You know what you're going to do. And so you begin to talk. Now, I'll give you some ideas when you're trying this. One is to maintain eye contact. Rather than looking down at the floor or looking at the ceiling, which says, I hope you'll get through with this soon, I got to go, Look in their eyes. You can stay engaged far better if you're looking into their eyes. A second idea is that you don't do anything else while you're listening to them. That's what I was talking about earlier. You lay the pencil down. You're not fiddling with the pencil. You lay the pencil down. You lay the magazine down. You lay the remote down. Nothing in your hands. You're just looking at them, giving them your undivided attention. A third thing is that you observe their body language. If when they're talking to you, you notice that their fists are clenched, or you notice their hands are beginning to tremble, or you notice a little tear begins to flow, these things are communicating something of what's going on inside of them. And what you want to do is listen for feelings, not just what they're saying, but what are they feeling. And some of us haven't had a whole lot of experience with this because we're not very in touch with our own feelings and we're not very sensitive about other people's feelings. But you want to listen to feelings. The question that needs to be in the back of your mind when you're talking to your spouse is, what are they feeling? And especially if you see some of these body language things that indicate that they feel deeply about this. What are they feeling? Because feelings are important. You see, this love language differs from words of affirmation. In that words of affirmation, you're focusing on what you're saying to them. You're building them up. You're encouraging them. But this love language focuses on getting to know each other, this quality conversation thing. And that's why we're sharing both events that happen in our lives, but also feelings. We're sharing ideas, we're sharing desires, we're sharing frustrations. We're getting to know each other. Another really key element in quality conversation is that you don't interrupt each other. One research project indicated that the average person listens 17 seconds before they interrupt and give their idea. You understand what happens when you interrupt someone? You're saying to them, your idea is not important, listen to me. Or you're saying to them, I got it, let me tell you what to do about it. So we're giving them an answer when we really haven't even heard the question. And there's a little verse in Proverbs that says something about if you answer a question before you've heard the question, you're very foolish. So you want to hear what the person is saying. So don't interrupt each other in the process. Quality conversation involves self-revelation. You're actually telling things about yourself. You're trying to get to know each other. Several years ago, I put together a little flip chart. It's called Love Talks for Couples. It has questions, a question on this side and a question on this side. It sits in the table, kind of a little A-frame thing. It's the same question on both sides. Such questions as, when you were a child, what did you collect? Or give me a memory that you have with regards to snow. Well, there's a question on there. My wife and I were going through this after a friend of mine and I put it together. And there's a question that says, what was your most serious childhood injury? And she told me about the time she was 4 years old. She got in the medicine cabinet. She took sleeping pills and didn't wake up for 36 hours. And no one knew what was wrong with her. I said, Carolyn, you never told me that. She said, you never asked. See, there's a lot of things about us that we don't know because we never ask each other. The purpose of quality conversation is to get to know each other. So think of some questions you might ask each other. What was your life like when you were 5 years old? Well, if they can't remember when they were 5 years old, that tells you something too. Maybe it wasn't too pleasant. They didn't want to remember when they were 5 years old. But we ask each other questions and listen, and what happens is we get to know each other. It builds intimacy in the relationship. And for the person whose love language is quality time, there's nothing more important than you're sitting down and giving them your undivided attention. Now, let me go back to that matter of feelings, because some of us are not in touch with our feelings very well. Particularly men seem to have a struggle with this in our culture, because a lot of guys were told when they were young, you're not supposed to have feelings. The little guy starts crying and says, come on, man, you're tough. Tough men don't cry, And so we kind of grew up with the idea that, I might have feelings, but I'm not going to tell anybody what I'm feeling, especially if it's negative. The fact is we all have feelings. And if we're going to have an intimate relationship, and if we're going to learn how to do quality conversation, we have to learn how to share some of our emotions. Notice I say some. You can't share all of your emotions, but you share some of your emotions. I'm going to give you a little exercise. If you have trouble, being able to identify your emotions, for a week, 3 times a day, you sit down and ask yourself, what did I feel the last 3 hours? Just walk back over the last 3 hours of your life. What did I feel? For example, you're at work and it's 10 o'clock and you pull out your little notebook. You're going to write down your feelings, okay? What did I feel when this guy was tailgating me on the way to work? You had a feeling, okay? What did I feel when I stopped at the gas station and the automatic pump kept running and spilled gas all over the... What did I feel? You had a feeling. What did I feel when I got to the office and they told me that my assistant had been assigned to another project? I had a feeling, okay? You see, we all have feelings. If you reflect back over the last 3 hours, you do it 3 times a day, and you write down what you felt, you will get in touch with your feelings. And that night, I'm talking male or female, that night you can say to your spouse, here's 3 things that happened, and here's how I felt about them. You're ready because you actually thought about it throughout the daytime. Another factor that has to be considered in quality time, and particularly quality conversations, is our personality. In my seminar, I deal with 2 basic personality types when it comes to talking. One I call the Dead Sea. Are you familiar with the geography of Israel? The Sea of Galilee in the north flows south by way of the Jordan River into the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea goes nowhere. Now, there are those of us who have that kind of personality. We have all kinds of thoughts and feelings and experiences flowing into our lives throughout the day. We have a large reservoir where we store all of that, and we're perfectly happy not to talk. In fact, if you say to a Dead Sea, what's wrong? Why aren't you talking? A Dead Sea will say, nothing's wrong. What makes you think something's wrong? And they're being perfectly honest. It's just that they can be content not to talk. Now, on the other extreme is what I call the babbling brook. And that's the personality type that whatever comes in the eye gate or the ear gate comes out the mouth gate. And normally, there's not 60 seconds between the two. Whatever they see, whatever they hear, they tell. Now, typically, a Dead Sea will marry a babbling brook. Why does that happen? Because when you're dating, it's very attractive. If you're a Dead Sea, you date a babbling brook, you'll have a wonderful evening because you won't have to think, now, how will I get the conversation started? In fact, you don't have to think. All you have to do is sit there, nod your head, and say, uh-huh, and they'll fill up the whole evening. And if you're a babbling brook and you date a Dead Sea, you have an equally wonderful evening because Dead Seas are the world's best listeners. And you'll babble for 3 hours and they will listen to you and you will go home and say, what a wonderful person. So we attract each other. But then we get married and 5 years down the road, the babbling brook may be saying, you know, we've been married 5 years and I don't know him or I don't know her. And maybe the Dead Sea is saying, I know her too well. I wish they'd stop the flow, okay? Now, we have to consider this when we talk about quality conversation because your spouse's personality is not going to radically change. A Dead Sea will never become a babbling brook. And a babbling brook will never become a Dead Sea. But what we can do is we can meet in the middle. Any couple can have good quality conversation, but we have to take into account our personality. And don't expect, something of your spouse that they will never be able to do because they're never going to be able, if you're a babbling brook, to talk like you talk. So we take that into account and we can have really good quality conversation. But there are other dialects of quality time. There's quality activities, for example, in which we are doing things together. But the emphasis is not what we're doing. The emphasis is on the fact that we're doing it together. And it could be anything. It can be planting a flower garden together. It can be chasing a rabbit through the woods together. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could. It could be going to the symphony. It could be going to a ball game. You can do anything that at least one of you enjoys doing and the other is willing to do. You don't have to both enjoy it to the same degree, but one of you really enjoys it and the other is willing to do it. And the purpose is not really because of the activity. They want to do it because they want to be with you, and they know that's your love language, so they want to give you quality time. I don't know if you've ever tried this. Taking a walk through the old neighborhood where you grew up or where one of you grew up and asking them questions about their childhood and letting them point out to you who lived over here and who lived over here, and that's the field we used to play baseball in, and over there is where we used to go to chase rabbits, and over here, you know. And what were the pleasant things about your childhood? And then to say, you know, what were the unpleasant things about your childhood? Do you remember any painful experiences, you know, around this place? But see, all of us have memories and feelings and thoughts, but walking through the neighborhood brings those things back and gives us a reason for sharing them with each other. And you come away from that experience feeling like you know your spouse better because they will likely reveal some things you've never heard before. So it's a good way to spend quality time. You might also walk through the cemetery together, the old family cemetery, and let them tell you about the people that used to, oh, I remember Mr. Porch over here, yeah, remember him. Yeah, remember we played in his backyard, you know. Oh yeah, oh this is the family, yeah, on Halloween we got in trouble with this family. Let them tell you, just walking through the cemetery. That can be a good experience. Or if you live in a city that has a city park where they rent bicycles, you can rent a bicycle and ride through the city park together. And stop, you know, when you see flowers or when you see a duck or when you see a little child running in front of you, you stop. But, you know, you just riding through the park. You see, getting in different settings, just the two of you, often brings out things that would never come out in other ways. But even if you don't talk on these activities, the fact that you're together, that my spouse was willing to take time, 2 hours, they take time to go riding in the park with me. Or, of course, you can plan a picnic or a weekend away together. You see, if your spouse complains that we don't ever get away together, you know, we haven't been away for a weekend in a year, their love language is probably quality time, and they're just dying, you know, and it doesn't cost all that much, you know. We can stay low if we have to, but or you plan ahead so you can, you know, stay a little higher. But at any rate, quality time says, I want to be with you. I'm willing to invest this time and this money and this energy with you. And to the person whose love language is quality time, it is super, super important that you give them some undivided attention, whether it's activities or whether it's talking. Now, does it take time to do all of this? Yes. Does it take energy? Yes. Sometimes it takes money. Yes. Is it worth it? You bet it is. Because what happens if this is your spouse's quality, if this is their primary love language, their love tank fills up. They feel loved. And I'm telling you, when they feel loved, they're much more pleasant to be around because their love tank is full. So, now this may or may not be your spouse's primary love language, but this week I want you to focus on giving each other more quality time than you normally do, okay? Even if it's not their primary language. I want you to focus on that this week, and let's get a little practice on speaking the love language of quality